Hi, I'm Mark David Gerson. Welcome to Stories and Reflections, where my stories are also yours. When I was a kid, one of the local TV celebrities, at least for me and other kids, was Magic Tom. Magic Tom, Tom Auburn, had a daily show on Montreal's CFCF TV that was so popular it ran for over a decade. He also performed at birthday parties at local restaurants, including Piazza Tommaso, a local landmark that was a few minutes from our house. And despite years of lobbying, I never got to have a birthday party at Piazza Tommaso with Magic Tom, although I have a vague memory of attending someone else's party there. Magic Tom was hugely popular, and not only in Montreal. According to Magicpedia, a sort of Wikipedia for all things magic, March 3rd, 1983 was declared Magic Tom Auburn Day on Maui, in honor of all the shows he did on the island. Whether we're kids or adults, there's something about magic that's irresistible. It's certainly irresistible to me. Maybe that's why one of my all-time favorite TV shows is still Bewitched, with Elizabeth Montgomery as everyone's favorite nose-twitching witch. Still, the kind of magic that Magic Tom did wasn't real. It was illusion. And although Samantha's magic in Bewitched was real in TV land, it wasn't real on this side of the picture tube. More's the pity. The kind of magic I want to talk about here today is real magic. Not entertaining illusions, but the actual magic that fills our lives every day when we're open to it. Miracles too, because miracles are also a kind of magic. I have lots of stories about the magic and miracles I've experienced in my life. So many, in fact, that one of my too many book projects in progress is a memoir-style book of those stories. It even has a title, A Lifetime of Miracles, a memoir of magic and manifestation. It has a working cover too, which you can see on the screen if you're watching this on video. I shot the image for the cover in Pismo Beach, California, at a spot hugely popular with pelicans. Why pelicans? Because in some traditions, pelicans remind us that we're always supported, no matter what challenges we face. Pelicans can even be seen as guardian angels of a sort. In other words, pelicans can be carriers of a certain kind of magic and generators of certain kinds of miracles. Although I've already written about 13,000 words on A Lifetime of Miracles, I have so many book projects queued up right now that it'll take a whole lot of magic and miracles, and not to mention bunches of flocks of pelicans, to get through them all, especially when you consider that new book projects keep being added to the list. For now, let's just say that I've experienced so much magic and so many miracles that it was hard to know which to share with you today. So for today, I've chosen 3, or rather 3 have pushed their way to the front of today's storytelling queue, which tells me that I'm probably sharing them as much for me as for you. And to be honest, that's probably true of all the stories I share with you here. So today's first story goes back to Maui, about 18 years after Magic Tom Auburn Day, so probably to around 2001. If you were here for Stories and Reflections 25, you'll remember that I talked about our 3.5 years in Hawaii as having been a trial by fire. Well, Maui was particularly challenging. Even though I hated my jobs on the Big Island, mostly timeshare related, those jobs did in the end support us financially, more or less. Maui, though, was different. Remember Alice and Lewis Carroll's Through the Looking Glass? And how at one point she and the Red Queen are running as quickly as they can, but the scenery never changes? As the Red Queen explains it, it takes all the running you can do to keep in the same place. That's what it felt like on Maui. Only on Maui, the running alone would never have done the trick. Even with the running, it took a whole bunch of magic and a whole lot of miracles to keep us from falling farther and farther behind. One day, a check for $80 arrived in the mail just when we needed it. And although it was made out to me, we never did figure out who it was from or what it was for. We were just grateful for the magical bailout. Another day, I was driving a taxi at the time. It was an aging mud-brown Ford Aerostar, held together with prayers and duct tape, a customer topped up a $60 fare with a $40 tip. But my real first story involves Alberta. Not the Canadian province, but a guardian angel very much in the Pelican mold. Alberta worked for Norwest, a finance company that later merged with Wells Fargo. I say Alberta worked for Norwest, but to this day, I'm not absolutely certain that that's true. I'm not even certain that Alberta was real the day we met her. This was on Maui, at the Kahului branch of Norwest, and my wife and I were there hoping to catch one of those unsolicited loan checks you get in the mail. Those are the ones where the fine print always says something like, subject to credit approval. Ours, I think, was for $1,500, which went a lot further 25 years ago than it does today. Whatever the amount, we definitely needed it. We knew credit approval was probably a long shot. That's because although my credit had been perfect when we landed in Hawaii 2 years earlier, it was far from perfect now. Very far. As we walked into the branch, we were welcomed effusively by a heavy-set woman with a warm, genuine smile. Her name was Alberta, she said. When I showed her the check, she ushered us to her cubicle. I don't think Alberta ever stopped smiling the whole time we were there. But when we left, we were the ones smiling. Somehow, the loan had been approved. Yes, that was magic, welcome magic, amazing magic. But that's not quite the magic I'm talking about. Well, not exactly. Because we made our monthly loan payments at the last minute, we were always making those payments in person at the Norwest branch. Always. And in all those months, we never saw Alberta again. Never. Moreover, no one at that branch was ever even remotely friendly, and no one even smiled. No one. Had Alberta quit? Had she been fired? Had she ever really been there beyond the hour or so we spent with her? You tell me. I think about Alberta a lot, especially when I'm going through rough financial times. She's a constant reminder of the magic that ensures that I'm always taken care of, even when the situation looks hopeless. And whenever I do think about Alberta, I remember the CBS drama Touched by an Angel that was on the air at that time. If you don't know the show, Touched by an Angel was about a trio of angels who travel the earth, helping and inspiring people who have no idea that their benefactors are angels. Alberta was definitely an angel, earthly or heavenly, it doesn't matter. So that's my first magic story. For the next story, we jump ahead a few years to fall 2017. For my birthday that year, I decided to take a short road trip from Albuquerque to St. Louis in my brand new Toyota Prius. Now, the story of how I got that car involves a whole bunch more magic, but that isn't this story. This story starts in St. Louis at the Gateway Arch, which from the very first time I experienced it back in late 2005, always felt like some kind of spiritual portal, as though passing under it would be an act of transformation that triggered a major shift, a transition from one chapter of my life to another, a gateway. Now, that wasn't why I went to St. Louis for my birthday. Yet once there, I wanted to experience the Arch on my birthday. That's because my birthday and the months leading up to it have so often heralded some sort of life change for me. To be honest, I didn't have any strong sense of shift when I walked under the arch that birthday day. But the Gateway Arch definitely delivered its gateway a few days later on the drive back to Albuquerque. As I drove southwest out of St. Louis through green rolling countryside, a landscape with a kind of trees and vegetation I hadn't experienced in over a decade, and a landscape that reminded me somewhat of where I lived in Canada, I suddenly felt done with the desert. Except for my rainforest months on the Big Island, I'd lived in desert or desert-like surroundings my entire time in the U.S. And it was time for a change. It was time to leave the stark monastic beauty of the Southwest. And after much meditation and tuning into inner guidance, I opted for the lush luxuriance of the Pacific Northwest. It would be a leap of faith, my biggest yet, a 1,500-mile leap to Portland, a city I didn't know. And it would be a leap without the safety net of savings, prospects, friends, or family. Within weeks of having made my decision to leave, a friend pressed a $1,000 check into my hands. She had made her own leap of faith move some years earlier, she explained, and she'd been helped in similar fashion. That was the next miracle. Soon after, I set my departure date. Yet I still didn't know where I was going to land. Would I have to stay in a hotel at the other end while I figured out what to do and where to do it? And what would I do with my belongings? I didn't have much, but it wouldn't all fit into the Prius. And once in Portland, would it all have to go into storage while I sorted myself out? Before I could seriously address those questions, more magic kicked in. An offer of a month's house sitting in Portland. Of course I accepted. About a month later, as my house-sitting gig was just about done and I realized I still didn't have the resources to rent an apartment, the folks I was house-sitting for invited me to rent my room and stay on. Another miracle. Eventually, I was able to rent a terrific condo of my own and do it in the Portland neighborhood I'd fallen in love with, the downtown-adjacent Pearl District. I've mentioned in several past episodes how the bottom ultimately fell out of my finances and how I had to leave Portland and embark on the open-ended road journey I describe in my memoir, Pilgrimage: A Fool's Journey. On the surface, that odyssey didn't feel at all magical. I often didn't know from one day to the next how I would pay for another night's accommodation or another tankful of gas. But even if it didn't feel magical, it was filled with magic. Because somehow I always managed to make it from one day to the next. So this next story isn't about those 3 months as much as there was lots of magic in those 3 months. It's about how that journey ended. So it's Wednesday, August 28th, 2019, my 93rd day on the road since leaving Portland, since Portland kicked me out. I'm back in Sedona for the weekend, just for the weekend. I have no way to stay beyond the weekend. I have no reason to stay beyond the weekend. And I'm here only because a local friend has arranged for me to give a writing workshop at the Literate Lizard, the local independent bookstore. And she's also arranged a place for me to stay, but only for the weekend. Tonight I'll design a flyer for the workshop, and tomorrow I'll take my laptop to my friend's so she can print copies for me. So it's now the next morning, Thursday morning, early. I'm on a meditative hike with my dog Kiri on the Soldiers Pass Trail at the northern edge of town. This trail and I have a history. 22 years ago, on a similar hike with a different dog, I was powerfully guided to not drive up to the Canadian border to restart the clock on my 6-month visitor privileges. Spirit knows immigration law, I heard. Spirit, as it turned out, did, and it knew a whole lot more than that. 4 months later, I fell in love with an American, and a month after that we got married, suddenly making me eligible for a green card. By the way, eligible did not mean easy. The journey to a green card turned out to be a pretty rocky one, but I did end up with a green card. And one of Portland's many gifts to me during my time there would be my U.S. citizenship. But that was then. Now I'm back in Sedona, having lived here twice and left here twice. And as Kiri and I clamber up the Red Rock Trail at Soldiers Pass, I'm overcome by a profound sadness. My sadness has nothing to do with yesterday's return to town. It has everything to do with those 2 departures. The first, when my wife and I left for Hawaii in 1998. The second, when our marriage broke up in 2004. Although at the time, I experienced the full emotional impact of the life events that pushed me out of Sedona. Until now, I've never given myself permission to acknowledge how wrenching those leap-takings were. Suddenly, I'm overcome by all the grief I'd buried each time I walked away from Sedona. Walked away, driven away from the spiritual oasis that the land here has always been for me. With each exodus, it was as though a part of my soul had been ripped out. At the time, I couldn't let myself feel all that. How could I, when on each of those occasions it was powerfully important, I knew it was powerfully important for me to move on, for me to leave Sedona behind? I couldn't. This morning, finally, I allow myself to touch that anguish. And once I do, I'm forced to face a wall of resistance I haven't acknowledged. A resistance to staying here beyond this weekend, to landing in Sedona again, to landing in Sedona for a third time. Thing is, I don't want to have to feel that grief again. And then I hear this question from deep, deep within, from that innermost place I call my wisest self. It goes like this. Are you prepared to surrender fully to Sedona now, knowing you might have to leave again? I desperately want to say no. How can I say yes and face that heartbreak again? A heartbreak I now know to have been nearly as intense as the one I felt when my marriage ended. I hesitate. I know I have to say yes. I know it, but I still won't answer. I'm hoping against hope that in waiting, the question will change, that I'll be encouraged to stay without the probability of having to leave again at a future date. In the end, though, as I always do, I surrender. I will stay, I say aloud, to that wisest part of myself and the numinous red rocks around me. I will stay and make this my home again for as long as it needs to be my home. And when the time comes, if the time comes, I will move on to whatever is next for me on this journey, wherever that is. Less than an hour later, I'm leaving my friends, clutching a stack of workshop flyers. And as I get to my car, I declare again out loud, if I'm to stay in Sedona, I need a place to live. Within seconds, my phone pings to an incoming text. It's from a longtime Sedona friend, one of the first people I met when I got here in 1997. I have manifested an amazing place for you to stay, I read. Clients of hers, she does dolphin energy work, have had to call off their trip to Sedona too late to cancel their booking at a local timeshare. The unit, she writes, is mine for the next 3 weeks starting tomorrow if I want it. Better still, it's free. Do I want it? Hell yes! Sedona's magic didn't end there. Over the next 3.5 years, through all the turbulence and upheaval of COVID, Sedona kept finding me places to live. Until, of course, my 2019 fears came to fruition and it was time to leave again. Now, today, as I shared in Stories and Reflections 27, it seems it's time to return. I didn't share this in episode 27, but I had some of the same initial resistance this time as I did in 2019. In other words, I was reluctant to surrender to this new call without a guarantee that I wouldn't have to leave a fourth time. Of course, no guarantee was forthcoming. Spirit, higher self, higher consciousness, God, the universe, the great pumpkin, whatever you choose to call it, doesn't work that way. Anyhow, just like in 2019, I have no idea how a return to Sedona is possible. And maybe that's the reason I've needed to revisit those stories this week, to remind me of the magic and miracles that have always surrounded me, and maybe also to remind me of those particular miracles. I talk about magic and miracles a lot in 2 of my Way of the Fool books. And here's how I open the Way of the Fool's step number 11, which is called Embrace the Magic. Miracles are at hand in every moment of every day. It's our limited vision that prevents us from seeing them. It's our limited sense of what is possible that prevents us from believing in them. It's our fear that prevents us from embracing them. How do we attract more magic and miracles into our lives? By opening our eyes, hearts, and minds in awe and gratitude to the abundant miracles already magically present. From the miracles of breath, of laughter, of love, of life, to the magic of a flower, a rainbow, a seascape, a sunrise, to the miracles of serendipity, synchronicity, wonder, connection. It's not about expecting miracles to show up. Expectation takes us out of the now moment. Rather, it's about acknowledging what is already abundantly present in our field of vision. for it is our openness to everyday miracles that seeds the exceptional ones. And it's the exceptional ones that remind us that on the way of the fool, the impossible is always possible. And here's the affirmation-style declaration that concludes, "Let miracles find you." It's another step, number 11, but this time it's in the way of the abundant fool. I'll say it slowly, phrase by phrase, so you can repeat it after me. And if you're watching on video, I'll put the words up on the screen. I, your name, so insert your name there. I, your name, step into that magical realm where everything is possible and where miracles occur with each breath. And so it is. Again, I, your name, step into that magical realm where everything is possible and where miracles occur with each breath. And so it is. Sit with that for a moment and maybe commit to making that the affirmation you start each day with. I, your name, step into the magical realm where everything is possible and where miracles occur with each breath. And so it is. One final quote for today, this one from my novel, The Moon Quest. Once you let yourself dream the impossible will come to pass. Once you let yourself dream the impossible will come to pass. So take a moment now with me to dream the impossible as you embrace the magic that's out there, always available to you, waiting for you to acknowledge it, waiting for you to invite it into your life. It's ready for you. Are you ready for it? Thanks for joining me for Stories and Reflections today. I hope you found moments in my stories that touched something in yours. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. And for more of my stories and help telling yours, check out my books at markdavidgerson.com or from online booksellers worldwide. Until next time, don't forget that you're a storyteller too, and keep telling your stories. The intro and outro music for today's episode is Heartwarming by Kevin MacLeod from Incompetech.com, licensed under Creative Commons.